When I see a DevOps team, sometimes that's a bit of a DevOps smell, frankly. The idea that there's a DevOps team who creates infrastructure that developers use is not a terrible idea, as long as the developers are the ones that use it. The problem is when it introduces a new dependency, and now development is somehow dependent upon DevOps. Not good.
Yeah. When I was reading the definition on Wikipedia of DevOps, it talked about the intent of DevOps was to increase the collaboration between developers and operations, to make that handoff much more seamless. But I don't think that goes far enough. And I think what we need to do is we need to look at what you're talking about here is a DevOps team should provide the tools that are being used by the teams, but the teams are ultimately the ones in charge of the use of the tools.
That's right, because that's how you alleviate the bottleneck and actually move things through more quickly without the dependency on the operations.
Yeah, so that leads to the other half that people often neglect when they read the details of what CI/CD is. It's a shift in culture. And what is that shift in culture that DevOps is supposed to provide? And that's what you were alluding to just a minute ago. And that is the culture shift of it's my code, my team's code. We own the code. We own the deployment process of it. We own it running in production. And if anything happens in production, it's our responsibility to fix. It's a culture shift towards true, complete ownership of the code that you deploy.
If you ever want to test your theory on whether or not the team feels that it owns the running of code in production, just listen for comments like, well, I don't know what the problem is because it works on my machine.
Yeah. Part of the problem that we're seeing here is still organizations trying to cling on to the idea of specialization, which is a form of local optimization. They don't want the teams to have to specialize in knowing how to deploy software into production, so they specialize it, but it creates these handoffs, it creates these bottlenecks. And it can get worse. One of the organizations that I was coaching at, they had a new feature development team that then handed the code over to a DevOps team that would deploy it into production. And then they had a bug defect team that worked on the bugs that were in there in the release that got put out. And it sounds like a great idea. On paper, when you first hear about it, we got this team. They're the rock stars. They're the ones that are focused on delivering new features. We don't want to slow them down by having them fix bugs. And so we create another team here that will fix bugs. And they're usually not the lead developers. They're the newbies in the organization. And they don't understand the code very well. And their bug fixes created more bugs. And more technical debt got introduced into the software as a result of their attempts to do bug fixing that now affects the ability to deliver new features. So we need to be really careful about local optimization and the potential impact that it has on the overall flow of value to the customer.
The picture that brings to mind is a development team that thinks that they're pretty good because they, on average, can get a story through development in 3 days, let's say. And what they might not be counting in the scenario you put together is that then it goes to the quality team who has to write and automate tests, and that might take another 2 days. And if they find a problem, it might come back to development for another day before it goes back to quality again for another day. And the development team is likely to think of that as a 4-day cycle. And in actuality, it's more like twice that.
Yeah.